Infotecarios Podcast, el mundo de la información en constante evolución.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon if you're watching us from any part of the world. We are getting today with different people from different parts of the country. Un paréntesis, estamos haciendo esta conversación de hoy en inglés porque tenemos gente angloparlante como invitada en la sesión de hoy. Entonces vamos a estar haciendo la conversación en inglés principalmente. Vamos a tener traducción automatizada gracias a las geniales herramientas de inteligencia artificial para que nos puedan seguir. Y de todas maneras, ustedes saben que en Infotecarios somos muy trabajadores y comprometidos y tendremos una versión subtitulada más adelante para que todos lo puedan disfrutar en diferido. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Soy Alejandra y voy a cambiar otra vez al inglés para presentar a nuestros invitados. Hello again, Carl, Emily, Rosario, and Alan. We are talking today about Archives Unleashed. It's a fantastic project that you all are part of it, either from the starting as a founding member and developing these amazing projects, or being part of the cohorts that have implemented this tool. And so we are having a great time. I'm not going to read all of your biographies, which are very interesting. So maybe if you can just say your name and maybe your main project or contribution to this project, and where are you joining this session from, please? Whoever wants to start.
The last are the first. So, Carl, welcome.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. Afternoon in Philadelphia on the East Coast of the United States for me. I work with the Internet Archive, so it has been my privilege to serve the scholars on this call by helping them develop the tools that allow them to perform the kind of new kinds of research methods they want to use for web archives as a primary source. There are a whole lot of very talented engineers behind me doing the real hard work, but I'm happy to take credit for all of it.
Fantastic.
That's great. Thank you, Carl. Who will be the next? Alan,
Hi.
welcome.
Or Emily.
Or Emily, yeah.
Sure, I'll go super fast. Well, thank you all so much for having me here today. It's great to be part of this conversation. My name's Emily Lynell Edwards. I'm an assistant professor of digital humanities at St. Francis College in Brooklyn, and I was part of the 2022-2023 cohort working on a project looking at Mormon mommy bloggers sort of online in the early 2000s, 2010s.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce myself, but I'm going to do it in Spanish. Yo soy Rosario Rogel y, bueno, he tenido la suerte y la fortuna de estar en Infotecarios en otros momentos. Yo soy profesora en la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas en la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de México, en Toluca, y tuve la gran fortuna y el privilegio de estar participando en el proyecto Archives Unleashed en la corte 22-23, al igual que el equipo de Emily, y nosotros estuvimos desarrollando un proyecto sobre análisis de páginas web de movimientos feministas en América Latina, y fue súper interesante, así que agradezco mucho la oportunidad de estar aquí.
Genial, Rosario. And Alan, please, if you either in English or Spanish, as you wish.
Hola, muchas gracias por la invitación. Mi nombre es Alan, soy mexicano, pero actualmente estoy estudiando la maestría en sociología en la Universidad de Victoria en Canadá y estuve trabajando en el mismo proyecto que Rosario, analizando sitios web archivados de páginas feministas en América Latina y también estuve a cargo de la creación de nuestro propio archivo web con páginas de activistas feministas en Latinoamérica.
Genial. Thank you so much. So maybe, Saul, do you agree if we start with our first question for Carl regarding the Well, maybe a short description about. I'm gonna do that in for everybody about the project we're talking about today. Archives Unleashed is a web archiving initiative that connects researchers to explore large web archives. In this interview, we will highlight the pioneering work of two research teams from the 2022-2023 cohort, the second and final cohort of students in this project. And that's why we have here Emily and Rosario and Alan. And so everybody knows how important the archives, and we have a bunch of professionals that gather this information, but maybe we are pretty much used to physical archives, as in those folders where you file stuff. But internet, ever since it came up, it was open for information and having stuff online. It has been important to preserve it. So we, of course, know the Internet Archive as one of the major projects doing this important duty. But then Archives Unleashed comes up. So I would like to know, to ask Carl, can you tell us a bit about the role of Archived in the Archives Unleashed project and how it connects researchers to explore large web archives and the importance of it?
Yeah, certainly. The Archives Unleashed project is kind of formed from the problem of studying history, society, culture from the 1990s onward, right? In order to do this, we need to use the web as a primary source, because that's where so much was happening outside of academic or text discourse. That is easier said than done. While the Internet Archive makes it very easy to find your old blog from the 2000s, if you happen to remember the URL, there's not a whole lot you can do to explore and analyze all of that web scale content without more tools and more help. As long as we have had the Wayback Machine and archived collections, curated collections on specific topics in web archives, there have been researchers with questions that are answered by these sources. But every time we provide them with the original data is kind of a project in and of itself. It's very difficult to provision to a scholar because the format is very complex and strange. If you're not an expert already in web archives, you have to kind of learn this as well. And just the scale of it is so vast that it kind of excludes a lot of scholars who don't, for instance, have a supercomputer center at their disposal at all times. So this project really aimed to take down those two barriers. One, technical, so that the data could be accessed in a familiar format at a usable scale. But then actually more importantly in the process, and the basis for this cohort model being to form a kind of community of practice, to bring together the people like you have on the call today who can share their methods, learn from one another, start collaborating on publications, and build out to more and more support kind of around academia and the general public for using web archives in new ways.
Yeah, and then of course this generating this opportunity for non-professionals or non-engineers or non-programmers is very significant as how much our research can reach if going beyond those barriers, because in the end that's what it is. It just made me think about, for example, Wikipedia, when people might want to join Wikipedia, but then they are like, oh no, but I don't know this, or editing, or I cannot do it in HTML. Those all come up as barriers, and it's very significant to surpass them or make the ability of working on it, make people cross that such barrier, or maybe not a barrier, but a threshold, like maybe you are shy and you don't know if you're welcome there, or you don't know if it's something for you. So thinking about the Archives Research Compute Hub, how does this facilitate the handling of large data sets for researchers?
Yes, so this is kind of the end service or product, if you will, that comes out of this collaboration. As these research discussions, consultations are happening very much like they would between a scholar and a librarian and a research team, we are developing the tools with our engineers to deliver the source material in the format that the researchers need. So very simple example being, for instance, Dr. Edwards' team might have identified a dozen blogs from the Wayback Machine that they wish to do some kind of natural language processing on or topic modeling. That might require us to pull a vast amount of data from our archives. But what's happening in Arch is we kind of take out all of the technical things that we need for preservation purposes, for access purposes in the Wayback Machine, and deliver it in kind of the textual format that is needed for research. So something like a 2 terabyte size web archive collection becomes a 5 megabyte spreadsheet file with all of the web pages listed and their text, which is all that's really needed in this context. So we built out in the process about a dozen of these typical use cases that is a form of research data set that a research team might need. So we could automate the process and they just have to push a button that says, I want all of the text or all of the images or all of the kind of link graphing for the websites in this collection.
Great, yeah, and I think that will make me maybe go a bit for the rather than just talking about the basis or the origins of this project, maybe talk to Emily and Rosario about how this tool developed their inquiries or their research, because for example, mommy blogging of Mormon mommy blogging is something really specific that maybe people will hardly think that I could maybe go into the Wayback Machine and gather all this stuff and have something about it. So maybe how was your experience using these tools before talking about specific details of your projects? Maybe how does these tools help you find like the path to the point you were going? You know, like what do you wanted to do with those tools available?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Mormon mommy blogging, it is like a really niche topic. And our team initially became sort of interested in sort of exploring this very particular sort of place within the blogosphere because we were interested in influencers broadly, influencers and contemporary social media and, motherhood influencers, are really big. Even, I follow a lot of them on my, own accounts. And I became really interested in sort of connecting what we're seeing contemporarily to an earlier media era. And as it happens, actually, many of these motherhood influencers, they are Mormon or they're Christian. And so that became the kind of point of entry into saying, well, we really need to get to this earlier media era. We need to get to the long form blog, but how can we do that? A lot of these blogs are, we don't know where they are. There are dead links and things like that. And so we came to the conclusion that to answer our research questions of understanding this earlier tradition of motherhood influencing, we had to work with web archives. And for us, our team, that was a really new experience. We're qualitative feminist researchers, and we have done, my background is in feminist data science and visualization, but really social network analysis. So web archives were something completely out of my wheelhouse. And so we are really lucky to be part of the cohort where we receive a lot of training in how to sort of work within the platform and to take these web archives, like work files, into these like CSV files that I could work with. So it really became, this question of how do we get to these primary sources from this earlier media era, and how do we kind of transform the web archive data into something that we can work with, as researchers who are not working with supercomputers or who don't have really high level programming language knowledge, but who want to understand how information travels, how creators and communities grew. And so that really just led us to the Archives Unleashed project. And we received incredible support in kind of developing our own skills so that we could then take these, smaller packets of files and then sort of, transform them, in Gephi or, in the terminal or other ways.
Yeah. Rosario, what about you?
Yeah. Oh, first of all, I want to apologize with Emily and Carl, but taking into account that the audience of this blog is mainly from Latin America, and they already know they already know what is the project about, the thing that we developed. I'm gonna try to explain it in Spanish. I prefer. Yep. Ok, el proyecto que nosotros presentamos, lo que decía hace un momento va a salir ahí traducido, pero como la audiencia es latinoamericana y aquí en Infotecarios son muy incluyentes, vamos a hablar una mezcla de español e inglés porque la audiencia es fundamentalmente latinoamericana. El proyecto que nosotros desarrollamos está, porque lo seguimos desarrollando, vinculado con el rescate de lo que está colocado en las páginas web de los movimientos feministas en América Latina. Todo esto empezó porque teníamos un proyecto de investigación previo a donde lo que nosotros buscábamos era algo muy similar a lo que hacen en Archivit, era archivar la web, archivar en web como movimientos feministas. Les cuento como muy rápidamente. Nosotros estábamos viendo que durante los movimientos feministas que acontecen en los últimos años, hay muchas intervenciones urbanas que hacen los movimientos durante las marchas, pero de esas intervenciones quedan muy pocos registros, ¿no? Porque se borran inmediatamente las pintas en las paredes y estas cosas, y casi toda esa información solamente queda de manera disgregada en las redes sociales. Entonces nos empezamos a preguntar si en las páginas web de los movimientos feministas había alguna forma de archivar o de tener esta información como colocada, o qué era lo que estaban trabajando las páginas web feministas. Entonces, ese fue el proyecto que nosotros propusimos hacer. Se llama analizar el tiempo, espacio y los textos, lo que está incorporado en las páginas web de los movimientos feministas en América Latina. Pero y para ello, al principio propusimos trabajar como con 5 colecciones, pero la verdad es que la colección exclusivamente de Derechos Humanos que está desarrollada por la Universidad de Columbia es súper gigante. Pues con esa tuvimos como más que suficiente para hacerla, porque aparte tampoco es que tenemos supercomputadoras para poder hacerlo, teníamos que trabajar con las computadoras que teníamos nosotros, digamos, nuestras computadoras personales. Así que con esa colección tuvimos como más que suficiente para procesar una gran cantidad de información. El problema que nosotros detectamos, se los cuento como digamos, para que no parezca novela de terror, los hallazgos que nosotros encontramos fueron que no había información de América Latina. Si bien es un archivo gigante, la mayor parte de la información que está resguardada sobre páginas de movimientos feministas en esta colección, prácticamente no había nada de América Latina. Entonces advertimos ahí un problema, digamos, que tiene que ver con el lenguaje, que que casi todo lo que se archiva desde el norte global, ¿no? Lo archivan en inglés y lo archivan, digamos, bibliotecarios o infotecarios que están radicados allá y que hace falta participación de América Latina. Y justo por esa razón es que nosotros propusimos desarrollar nuestra propia colección, que era una colección sobre movimientos feministas en América Latina, para tratar de llenar ese hueco. No sé, Alan, si se me olvidó algo, quieras mencionarlo. Da igual que hables en español o inglés, ¿verdad? Sí.
Pues bueno, nada más comentar que la herramienta de Arch, que fue la que igual usó todos los equipos de esta corte, pues nos ayudó también a llegar a esta conclusión de que no había archivos o colecciones en español. Para eso necesitaba filtrar, pues, de los 20 terabytes que tenía la colección de Human Rights, necesitaba filtrar para tratar de encontrar qué es lo que estaba en español y que era sobre movimientos feministas. Entonces, pues la mayor parte del trabajo fue ir filtrando la información, porque aunque estos archivos tienen una gran cantidad de datos, lo que nosotros necesitamos era muy específico y entonces no nos servía analizar toda la colección, sino solamente una pequeña parte de todo lo que había.
Fantastic. Gracias, Rosario y Alan. Thank you, Emily. I was just, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about something that happened this week. I have a colleague that often researches about genocides. She actually wrote a lot about Armenian genocide, and she used to publish it on a non-existing, no longer existing digital magazine. And she was just like suffering, saying like, oh, I wish I had saved those. Something happened to her computer, and she no longer had the original files, so she was suffering. And somebody suggested, well, why don't you search it on the Wayback Machine? So I went there and helped her find them. And although the first page of each section of the magazine was archived, not all of the articles were linked to it. You know how that works. And I was thinking how important it is to like have this social responsibility or commitment as digital users of archiving stuff that matter to you somehow. And then I was thinking about the responsibilities and compromises of archivists, librarians, infotecarios, whatever, that we should be doing that as a social service continuously and helping that. And now that as I was listening to Rosario and Alan saying that there's not much Spanish websites or websites in Spanish archived on any of these platforms, it's something that worries me. So maybe this fantastic episode we're having might be a call out. So I'm going to say it in Spanish. Por favor, bibliotecarios, archivistas, investigadores, académicos, asuman el compromiso de archivar la información, de verdad respaldarla, porque necesitamos tener estas fuentes disponibles, ¿no? Ahora nos van a contar un poquito más de cómo la herramienta les fue útil, pero este es un llamado de atención a la comunidad bibliotecaria, archivista, infotecaria del país, del país, México, pero también de la región hispanohablante que nos sigue desde distintas partes del mundo, porque verdaderamente se vuelve una preocupación, y asumirlo de eso, sobre todo, como un compromiso moral profesional. Sorry for my my call out, but I was it's something fantastic because it's something that actually happened this week, and kept me thinking about that, and saying like, how can we do this? And then coming back to the to ARC and the Unleashed Archives Unleashed project, Carl, I was thinking about putting these toolkits and these utilities. Tools, available for all is something that also connects engineering with librarianship and information services. So how do you, because coming from the Internet Archive and doing all archiving and this kind of projects that are very helpful and maybe widespread in the global north, but not so much in the global south, how can you, or what would be your suggestion or your invitation for people to join this, and in spite of the language barrier that might be a bit difficult for some?
Yes. Well, for one thing, we are announcements pending, hopefully next week, if all approvals go through. But we will be subsidizing access to ARCH tools for institutions in the Global South. So the first thing that anyone can do is go to webservices.archive.org and drop me a line and say, hey, I saw the interview. I'd like to use ARCH tools to learn more about what's available. Actually, anyone today can do that. There's a limited amount of tooling available just as kind of like a free sandbox area for people to learn what these tools are and what kind of analysis they can perform with them. Fairly limited, but this higher level of more dedicated service, providing specific data sets, using archiving tools like Alan and Rosario did to create the data sets. That's where we're looking to make more inroads. Starting today, for instance, if we can. I think the example that you started with from Wikipedia is really perfectly apt in this case, right? Because like there is a degree to which you can make the technology available to everyone. But not only is there a language barrier per se, but it's a cultural barrier where people on the inside speak their own languages, they have their own jargons, their own kind of technical expectations of one another. And that is kind of what we want to confront by working directly with more people in Latin America and across the global South. Maybe the smallest example I can give that I still like to bring up because it's a very funny example of interfacing with the engineers in this way is that Alan very early in the archiving process identified that, the Archive It website uses an indexing tool that can't understand diacritics. So it's messing up all of my nice descriptive work. Can you fix that? And it took, like a couple of days of back and forth with the engineers and testing fixes and QA review and deploying to a whole process that I think we could make a lot of progress on very quickly, but it takes starting somewhere.
One question. Sorry. Yeah, one question, following up of the comments of Alan. He mentioned something about the different languages that could find information. How you're working with that, and the tool it's working with other languages. What kind of languages? I'm thinking probably in Eastern Europe that we have a different, Cyrillic, for example, or Greek, something like that. And in Spanish, of course, we have the accents and different characters that could be different. Probably that could be a challenge in the programmation of the software and the database. How you are working with that, and what languages are working with the tool, and what is the future? Are you thinking in other languages? What are you working in that?
Yes, support for multiple languages is a big challenge. Thankfully, we're not going to try to take it on ourselves alone. There are a lot of open source tools out there available already, which we are adopting into our platform. For one thing, to again create this interoperability among research communities, among methods, so that everyone can use the same tools and processes. Example being, we have like a scientific research institute in France who is interested in using Arch to create named entity data sets in Chinese. So what we have today out of the box, if you use Arch today, is a named entity recognition tool that was built at Stanford University. It works on English language text, ideally. It doesn't really support that. But there are tools that we have used in the Archives Unleashed project with scholars that support all sorts of different modules for different language sets in topic modeling and natural language processing. So we are going to start adopting those into our back-end transformation processes as well, so that an end user could say, for instance, pull down a menu and say, I want the names in this data set in English, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, whatever the case may be. Other data sets, I think, are a little bit more language agnostic because they're kind of based on the language of the internet, which is things like file formats, hyperlinking. The output there might be a little bit English-oriented by default. So for that, I think it's a challenge of translation for processes that were really only ever written, standards and specifications that were only ever written in English. And there we need a good deal of assistance trying to make sense of this whole new language we created.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Alejandra.
Yes, my question was just related to what just Saul asked, which was about language, because I see that there's like this toolkit and there's a lot of videos and resources already available in English for people to jump in and find things for themselves. But we can see from the experience of Rosario and Alan that it can be used in Spanish, although having these little problems that can be solved in the moment, right? I think that it will be very a matter of practice, like taking the tool, implementing it in your own projects, and then if something comes up, you find a problem and try to solve it. And then this might be also a matter of having other professionals jump in the developing and improvement of the tool. And I think that's kind of the fantastic thing about the internet and all these projects that are online, that anybody can join in and add a feature that will help others and in advance. Would you like to say something about it, Rosario? Or because I saw you like.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the main problem is not working with different languages with the archives or with the databases. The challenge is to find information in your language inside the archives. This is the challenge for us, because at the end, I don't know, it's very intuitive. The use of this is very intuitive, because you need to take into account that in this case, for example, our group, we are not engineers, of course, and we are not librarians. In this case, we were working with a group from the political science faculty. Then we were students of communication or sociology or whatever, with some idea on how to use some files and whatever, and probably it's really intuitive, as Carl was saying. It's like the competing language, Then it's so easy that even a sociologist can use it, Then talking about the tools and talking about all those things, the things, but the challenge in I don't know, is the thing that for me, the challenge is to try to find in the archives, inside the archives, information in your own languages. Yes, this is the problem, I think, that you start to look for, and you say, what we are doing wrong, and at the end, you identify that the way in which the I don't know, the map is doing is only for English language. The people who have been archiving is only people from the global north. Because of that, the thing that you were saying, we need to encourage people from our region or Latin America to start doing this. Por eso pienso que el gran reto es, y justamente por eso agradecemos esta oportunidad de hablar con el público hipotecario, de vincularse para empezar a hacer archivado web, y por supuesto también trabajar con las herramientas, que francamente son bien fáciles. Como les digo, si un sociólogo las puede usar, cualquiera puede usarlas. No sé, Alan, ¿tú cómo lo viste? No fue tan difícil, ¿no? El reto es lo otro, el reto es encontrar información.
I think the challenge is not only finding information in your language inside the archives, but also identifying which are the absences, which are the silence and the biases inside of these archives. And the implications of having biased web archives is what Carl was saying earlier, that these web archives are being used to train large language models. They are used to train named entity recognition algorithms. And if these algorithms and these models are trained on biased data, then the results from those algorithms will also be biased. So that is why it is important to increase the diversity of languages and geographical representation in web archives, because they are being used to train all of these new things related to artificial intelligence and to natural language processing, and they are being trained with biased data.
Just going off of that, I think that's such a key point. In Rupika Rassam's text, New Digital Worlds, she talks about how we're sort of replicating this biased digital cultural record because of we're sort of replicating these dynamics. And if we look at traditional archives and all of these erasures and biases, we're in some sense, I think, replicating this again, but for digital text today when we look at the digital cultural record. And so I really think that this conversation is so crucial, that we're aware of this in the process of creating these new archives, to intervene now while this is still developing. So I just completely agree. And I think it's, that added aspect of the natural language processing and the artificial intelligence and training on these big data sets. I think that this is really, really critical. And I'm worried about the implications in the future, but hopefully, having conversations like this, I think, is so important.
And this is not only a problem that relates to language, but all sorts of barriers among communities. For instance, Emily's research team was very fortunate that the archives at Brigham Young University has an interest in collecting all of these Mormon blogs and websites and magazines, preserving them in a rather thorough and sophisticated way. Not everyone has a huge university and its staff and technical resources behind it to document their community movements. So it's kind of incumbent on everyone to participate at every stage of the process.
Yeah. Yes, thank you all so much, because it brought up a very interesting conversation that I think Martin wants to add a bit on it.
Sí, gracias. Bueno, lo voy a hacer en español también por atención a nuestro público iberoamericano, pero quería hacer este comentario. Ciertamente en la región iberoamericana o en los distintos idiomas tenemos el gran problema pues de compartir, ¿no? Ya lo mencionaba tanto Rosario como Alan. O sea, el problema no son las herramientas, la tecnología y las herramientas están ahí para ser utilizadas. El problema es que no tenemos esta cultura, desgraciadamente, de apertura, de compartir, ¿no? Aunque está el movimiento abierto, el movimiento de ciencia abierta, el movimiento de acceso abierto en América Latina o en Iberoamérica como algo de bastantes años, en la cuestión de documentar, de archivar y de compartir datos con estas herramientas abiertas, es algo pues totalmente vacío, ¿no? Que no necesariamente está sucediendo en nuestra región. Y en este sentido, me gustaría preguntarle a Rosario, a Alan, a Emily, a Carl, ¿qué motivaciones tuvieron o tendríamos que explorar en la región para justamente llevar a cabo estas iniciativas o estos proyectos, ¿no? Obviamente hay una motivación académica de investigación, hay una motivación de conservación, hay una motivación de apertura y de compartir, pero ¿cuál sería ustedes el elemento que pudieran decir es importante hacerlo por esto, ¿no?
Well, I would say that one of the important reasons why to do web archiving in the Global South or in Latin America in particular is that in addition that web archives are being used to train artificial intelligence tools and algorithms, it is also important to do so because if we don't archive the Latin American web, then we're losing a part of our history. We're losing a very important source on our history. For example, I was reading a couple of months ago that in 1994, the Zapatistas movement in Chiapas, they created a website in 1994. But if we go to the Wayback Machine, the first capture of the Zapatistas website is from 1997. So between those 3 years, we don't know what information was present in the Zapatistas website, even though this was a very important movement in Mexican history. It was not only happening offline, it was also happening on the web. And because there was, in 1994, there was not this idea of archiving the web and preserving online information, we lost those 3 very important years when the Zapatista movement was most active. So if we don't archive what is happening online in Latin America, we're losing a part of our own history too.
Going off of that, I think it's a challenge for humanities scholars in particular, coming from a humanities perspective, open access and open sharing and maybe, this impulse to engage in more collaborative projects and more strategic archiving, like Alan mentioned, I feel like is not maybe necessarily part of the humanities spirit necessarily, because traditionally we're working, just single folks, like maybe in a physical archive, but web archiving really necessitates collaboration and I think strategic archiving. And I think that maybe that's a conversation we need to have in our disciplines, that this is a new type of historical and humanities research that necessitates that spirit of collaboration and of sharing, because if we don't, I think, engage in that type of work, then we are at the risk of what Alan mentioned of just losing these large parts of history. And so I think that's a conversation that definitely needs to be had, and I think that a digital humanities kind of approach, I think, has been helpful there, because that's a lot more team-based, interdisciplinary. So I think maybe that's one way, sort of, emphasizing these cross-disciplinary partnerships to address some of these challenges.
And one thing that we did emphasize, I think, from the beginning of the Archives Unleashed initiative was the importance of publishing in academic journals as well, which is still, a rather exclusive process, but now involves more collaboration, more reproducibility built into finding and using these same data sets in order to develop methods. So there's still some currency, some value in using the open resources instead of gatekeeping and putting them behind a lock and key.
I will have a question. Do you know the number of projects that are running with this tool? And probably to invite to another colleagues and all around the world or any place, what kind of projects are running and using the tool? Do you have any information about it?
It's a good question. It's hard to say, only because some projects are based in archives and ongoing. Others have a specific research question or a research grant cycle. So active versus inactive is a little hard to define. I can say that most of the projects running have an international or cross-border focus. That was not even necessarily intentional, but we found that a lot of research universities and institutes that want to work on data sets that are themselves kind of multinational or cross-boundary have gravitated towards these. Others are they will be published kind of in the coming year. There's like maybe a half a dozen in the pipeline, in addition to Emily and Rosario and Alan's, that will kind of highlight the different ways that the technology has been used in the last 2 years. But I hesitate to say how many are ongoing at any one time. I can say that on the archived side, the curatorial side, building what will become the data sets for each output, there are at any given time approximately 1,000 different librarians representing institutions, mostly in North America, but increasingly as we focus outside, creating these collections. Sometimes, like Alan and Rosario, we have to create a new archive immediately to meet those needs. Others have been ongoing since the service, the web archiving service, launched in 2005. So various levels of depth and maturity and focus to these collections.
Great, thanks. Alejandra?
Yes, I was just gathering a bit of all that has been said, because I think it has been hard for people to understand how all the discourses available on the web are fitting these generative artificial intelligences, and how there's like this possibility of us as citizens, but of course as academics, as scholars, as librarians, as engineers, whatever, of joining and sort of identifying these opportunities, challenges, maybe problems, if I'm on the more negative side, and how to solve them as professionals with our tools and with our skills. So I was thinking maybe in the specific matter of the projects of the cohort, because I would like to let the audience know that there were 2 cohorts that received the opportunity and training of using this tool, which I think is fantastic, because sometimes you might see these things available, and as I was saying, either of shyness, ignorance, or just fear, you might not jump in and make the use of it. But I think the project is also so generous that has created some videos that if you go to their website, you can see those videos and where they explain different topics about the tool that is available. I watched them and I said, like, this is fantastic, because I had no idea of this feature. And I mean, I'm not an academic, so maybe that's because I'm not familiar with this. I'm more like a public librarian rather than academic one. But I think it's important for people to learn from this. So maybe I would like to learn about the experience of Emily, Rosario, and Alan in their specific projects. So maybe if you can just share us a bit about how, if your goals were met, if the challenge. I mean, we've learned a bit about the challenges on the research and the development of your project, but maybe just how the experience was. How did you even learn about this? Because maybe you were just browsing on the web and saw this thing, or maybe a colleague that you know. So maybe share a bit of that. Thank you.
Okay, challenges, we have a lot of them. Probably, I don't know, but this is not related with the project. This is related with the institutional stuff for us, because at the university, for us, it was really difficult to try to set the scholarship or the grant or in our own university. Because of that, we asked for another colleague to help us, since the Universidad de San Antonio, to get the money, because it was really difficult for our university, that all the bureaucratic and all those things at the very beginning. Then working with I don't know, we don't have these big computers. Then we needed to take some decisions in order to be able to analyze this big amount of information, and then we took a decision about how to analyze it. In this case, we were discussing with all the group, and then at the end we decide only analyze the PDFs, inside the web pages. Not because the PDFs are the most important, but because we needed to I don't know, to make a decision in order we can analyze it. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Alan, about that decision, and to talk about the other decision. When we identified that we didn't have enough information to analyze, because there were very few information about Latin American web pages, we decide to make our own collection. I don't know if you want to talk about the PDF decisions and how we work with our own collection, Alan.
Yeah, well, not having these very large computers to analyze big data was not necessarily a disadvantage, because it forced us to think more creatively on how to solve this problem and how to work with the project in a more manageable way. And that's how we decided to work with PDFs instead of the full text of the website, which is more difficult to process. Or at least takes more computing power that we did not have. So analyzing the PDFs allowed us to process all of the information in our own computers. And at the end, we ended up accomplishing the project goal of analyzing language and analyzing space in Latin American feminist movements, but instead of doing it with the 5 collections that we originally thought that we would analyze, we ended up comparing only 2 collections. The Human Rights collection created in Columbia University libraries, and the collection that we created ourselves, which is the Human Rights collection from Columbia is more focused on governments and large NGOs, and our collection is more focused on grassroots activist organizations. So it allows us to compare the institutional versus the activist side and priorities and the topics they are addressing.
Yeah, our team had a similar, I guess, hardware challenge or maybe opportunity as Rosario and Alan's team. My team, shouting out my co-researcher Robin Hershkowitz and our RA Lauren Andrikonic. We were also confronted with these collections, that to us felt like big data. They were like terabytes but to us that was big. And we really needed to find a way to make those collections work for us. The questions we were really interested in answering were, when we look at influencers today and mother influencers in particular, this is like a formalized job now in many ways. Like this is a form of digital labor. And it's also representing a very particular brand of American motherhood that is white, Christian, middle class. So we were interested in some of these questions of race and gender and labor, but we needed to go back to this earlier media era to really emphasize that what we're seeing now, it's not necessarily new, but it's connected to these other media patterns. And so we employed a lot of different methodologies. We were really looking at sort of networked connections. We were really interested in how content creators were connected and how they formed a community. And so working with Arch and processing these network derivatives was absolutely instrumental for us, because it allowed us to take that web archive data, turn it into something that I could work with in Gephi or, and in the data laboratory and kind of do the type of data visualization work I had been trained to do. So Arch would really sort of fill the gap between the raw web archive data and then the typical work that I do. And so that was incredibly helpful. And I think, in terms of meeting our project goals, we did a really interesting publication, a zine with the DIY Methods Conference, where we reflected on our methodological process that actually looked a little different than some other teams that were doing topic modeling and some kind of more complex programming, sort of things. And we were doing network analysis. We were doing, some textual analysis. And so I think in that sense, one of our goals was also communicating our experience to other critical feminist researchers who say, I'm interested in web archives, but it doesn't feel like a place for me because I don't have a computer science background, or I can't code in Python. And we wanted to share our experience and say, no, you can do this. You don't have to, you're part of this space too. And there's a way to do it in a way that is humanistic and that's aligned with feminist, approaches and theories. And so in that sense, I think, we felt like the project was really, really successful.
And hopefully it's a little bit fun too. I mean, it is for me. To your point, Emily, I was an art history student. That's how I got here. And whenever I'm creating a tutorial for one of these processes, I'm always hopeful and nervous to see, is the outcome kind of visually engaging and curious, and is it fun? And I've been having a lot of fun. I hope others can too.
Yeah, I think it's you all have shared very fantastic experiences of how when you're a researcher, you might have this idea of a topic you want to find out about, and then it might be very paralyzing and frightening, not knowing where to start, not knowing how to process information, not knowing where to go. But having these sort of tools, although they might show up challenges that you weren't expecting, I think it's important, and specifically in what Alan and Rosario shared, how you can become resourceful and make it shorter, or maybe tighten your interest. Abilities that come with research competences. Like you You might want to start these days, but then what you have at hand, or the resources, or the information, or whatever, makes you go here. And it's sometimes better and fun, I think, to do these adaptations and having these experiences going. So I'm very listening to you has made me hopeful and very enthusiastic about how significant researchers can go to a broader results with this tool, rather than just maybe doing more formal or I don't know, limited positions or opportunities that are already available. And it also made me think of how important are digital humanities. Today it has been increasing, but I think that you cannot do research in humanities or sociology or whatever without having this scope on mind. You know, like it will be very traditional, that it might be okay, but if you jump into this bright side of archive and web archiving, that is so important to have nowadays, I think that that will be a very nice change of event for people developing their careers. For librarians, I think that the thing that I like the most about this tool is how from library and information science and engineering, we can have a perfect match to offer researchers from any background to meet their goals, to find the information that they are looking for on the web, mainly thinking about digital researching. We are running out of time. Actually, it's already 1 o'clock in Mexico City. And we, of course, we would like to talk a lot more with you guys, because it has been so interesting. We had some questions planned, but as it happens, conversation flows in different paths and come even more engaging and interesting. We would like to know just 2 things. We understand that the Archives Unleashed project has somehow been terminated, like completed, as it is from, I think it was in July that it was completed. So people can go online and use the tools and find the information on their own. There wouldn't be a call out for a new cohort, but that tool is available and people can do with it. So maybe if you just can clarify, any of you can clarify about that, so people have the specific information they have and what comes further on. Maybe we do this, and then the last question.
Yes, so Archives Unleashed specifically was a project funded by a 2-year grant from the Mellon Foundation, led by University of Waterloo, York University, and the Internet Archive. That has ended. What is kind of ongoing for the Internet Archive at this point is a new grant cycle supported by our Institute for Museum and Library Services that expands ARCH outside of the web archive. So important to note, just I think as we're ending, that we are seeking more collaborators to contribute primary source material in other formats now. Text collections, image collections, really any kind of research, primary research materials that we can put in this similar home where there are computational resources on our side that can be used to perform analyses, transform data sets in all different formats. So that work continues, and like the Archives Unleashed project, it will be iterative. There will be many phone calls between me and researchers asking for advice and how we can improve the tools as we go. But the work does continue. And the research teams here are still certainly hard at work.
Fantastic. And just as a podcast specialized in library and information science, we are aware of the importance of the Internet Archive labor and what it has brought to many people in the world, either professionals or non-professionals. When I was a student, I studied a degree in philosophy, and I was focused on Derrida, on archive on Derrida, and I couldn't find available most Derrida works either in French or in Spanish in libraries in Mexico. So what saved my life was the Wayback Machine and the Internet Archive. So we would just like to express our solidarity with the institution that has been so terribly attacked in the last years, and how is this, because I think people don't understand the Internet Archive, many in the mainstream, like maybe something a bit more specialized people that do understand this, the important labor that it's been done from the Institute. So how, I would just like to make people aware that menacing such institute could impact all these other resources that are available for digitals. I mean, I don't want to go to the extreme side, but I do fear for the bad reputation is getting from the media. And I don't know, you might not be aware of, but in Mexico, the president of the publishing association in Mexico says that Internet Archive is a piracy website, which is like not understanding at all what the point of such an institution is. So maybe how do you, any of you, maybe mainly Carl, how do you see these menaces and these foul discourse on the Internet Archive for the future of the institution?
Well, I can be very brief because our general counsel would not appreciate my going on at length about this. Just to say, from kind of our position in the web and data side of things, honestly, we are so actively at work with so many different colleagues in libraries, archives, research institutions in the United States and around the world that they all kind of get it. We're all pretty connected infrastructure now. So as you say, it really comes out of a context of understanding directly through experience, that they have a much more sophisticated understanding of what it is that we do. They've been very, very supportive throughout, publicly and privately.
Yeah.
and thank you as well for your words of solidarity. They are appreciated.
Yeah, it's something that we do not like to leave behind, because I think it's also a professional responsibility, as either we are all from professions. If we were more like in the public library setting, it will be a civic responsibility or a civic compromise, I think. But yeah, just thanking in the name of everybody in Infotecarios, a big thank you for this project. A big thank you for sharing your experiences. A huge thank you for sharing your Saturday morning, evening, from wherever in the world you are. And just a big thank you, because I think this tool really opens new future for research and for archiving information, not only web online, but also in physical form, as you just stated. So I think it's a wrap. I don't know if Saul or Martin would like to say a few more words before ending this streaming of our podcast.
Martin.
Okay, bueno, pues thanks for these reflections, and bueno, muy interesantes todas ellas. Una última pregunta sería una opinión personal de cada uno de ustedes sobre las actuales amenazas a Internet Archive, al proyecto Internet Archive. Sabemos las demandas que tiene por haber abierto en pandemia ante una evidente necesidad de acceso a la información en Estados Unidos. Bueno, ¿cuáles son estas actuales amenazas del proyecto Internet Archive y de sus proyectos derivados, y futuras amenazas también que puede tener Internet Archive y sus proyectos derivados, ¿no? Sabemos también que ahora hay una nueva discusión en torno a el entrenamiento de inteligencia artificial. El entrenamiento de inteligencia artificial pues está obteniendo mucha información precisamente de Internet Archive, de repositorios, etcétera. Gracias al acceso abierto de la inteligencia artificial está saliendo, pues está siendo capacitada, ¿no? Y de hecho han salido notas de que sin el acceso abierto, mucha de la inteligencia artificial no podría ser capacitada, ¿no? ¿Cuáles son entonces las actuales amenazas y futuras amenazas que ustedes pueden ver en estos momentos para Internet Archive y sus proyectos derivados o asociados?
Well, I think that a threat is the privatization of information that was originally a public good and then it becoming privatized by these companies like Meta or OpenAI that are profiting from a common good that is available through the Internet Archive or through academic libraries. I think that is a very serious threat that we should be discussing more too.
Emily, from your perspective, how do you see this situation globally?
Yeah, I'm going off of, I definitely agree with Alan's point. I think that the privatization of information is a huge problem, but also going back to these gaps and sort of, erasures in the digital cultural record. I think that's something that I think about a lot in terms of particularly sort of activist content as well. This project that I did was more focused on influencers, but a lot of my other work looks at global social movements, feminist movements in India, the United States, and the UK, for example, looking at the Shaheen Bagh protests a few years ago. And, so much of that content is just gone. It's been scrubbed, and also the privatization of information, but also governments doing internet shutdowns and things like this, I think is also something we really need to think about, that it's not just a private sector problem, but also, governments enacting certain regulations, blackouts, scrubbing things. So I think that's something I'm worried about. But again, I hope that conversations like this are creating some of those connections so that maybe we can solve some of these issues, at least on a grassroots sort of collaborative level.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah. And I don't know, by my side, I think that there are a lot of challenges, not only for Internet Archive, but projects similar organizations are, first of all, the artificial intelligence abuse, no, which is increasingly being used for malicious purposes. And I think this is one challenge. Another challenge could be the geopolitical tensions and activism driven by geopolitical developments and all those things. Another one is related with the sophistication of cyber attacks, for example, or challenges related with cybersecurity and operations and all those things. Because of that, I think that the way in which we can support organizations like Internet Archive against these challenges requires different approaches. But first of all, investment in proactive security tools, for example, or adherence to security regulations, or mainly education and awareness, and stronger policies connected with the different device. And I think that in the case, for example, of research, the big risk is that we are not going to have enough information for analyzing the current things, the current actions, because related with the question that Martin has made before, which is why we wanted to analyze this. Nowadays, most of the movements, social movements, for example, are doing in internet, and mainly in social network, and all the information that is in social network, we can't reach them, and it's we need to pay for analyze it. Then, for example, one thing that we identify in our research is that there are very few web pages related with feminist movements. Very few. Most of them are using only Facebook for information and for for being in touch with all the activism, and this is a big problem. No, because of that, we think, for example, that it is important to develop skills between the people who are related with these movements, in order to try to tell them that this is the use of Facebook is okay, but you need to develop another kind of information who can be archived. What we're gonna do? The archivist of the this new century, because most of the information is in internet. What they are going to analyze, in which way they are going to work. I think this is one big challenge related with research. Yep.
And Kurt, technically, what the issue, challenges, threats you can see in the horizon?
Well, to bring it back to the topic of generative artificial intelligence, I think a simultaneous challenge and opportunity here would be that the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine collection and these archived, curated collections become increasingly valuable as we go forward as sources compared to the current live web and what is available there. I'll just put it that way. The material is of high quality. I'm so deep in the weeds of the system so much that I often can only see how messy it is and all the problems, but it's actually very high quality in comparison to where I think the web is going. But certainly I share Rosario's concerns about the walled garden effect of moving all of this cultural material into private networks. The good news there is that the answer always relies in making connections with people at the center, for instance, of these movements. If they are connected to librarians, archivists, preservationists of some kind, they can work together to preserve what is really important. And that makes the research product afterwards that much better, as Rosario and Ellen's project in web archiving kind of demonstrates. So it's harder. It's harder. It keeps people like me at work trying to solve new problems, but hopefully the quality, it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that all of your comments point to another color for librarians and archivists and information professionals, that we have a lot of responsibility on engaging people in archiving, in developing critical thinking skills, critical literacy skills, a lot of things that we are not having today, because it's somehow the presence of social media has simplified the ability of putting a speech or discourse online on web. And I remember the fantastic times of building your own site on GeoCities or having your blog on Blogger or whatever. I mean, there's still a lot of free platforms and templates to use and put your content online, but it's somehow, we have somehow become lazy, like doing the website building and putting this stuff there. So you just have the Facebook and just put it there. Everybody is there, or now with the TikTok or Instagram, whatever, it's easier to develop that. But as I was saying, with colleagues working with kids, they were complaining about why kids want to become YouTubers or influencers doing video, and say, well, because they have in reach a smartphone, digital camera, those that might be a bit vintage. They don't have volume, they don't have watercolors, they don't have stages, they don't have they don't have a lot of stuff that will make them more creative in those spaces rather than just online. So I think that's the bit of the challenge now, that you have this social media that somehow seems free, but you're not thinking that now your information belongs to a company that is making richer with your data and your discourse and the base you are creating. Now, I always, when this comes, I will think about this engraving by Goya that says the mind of a man creates monsters. So instead of doing, I will show you such engraving by Goya, because I think that's what we're having. We're not creating, I mean, aside of ARC or Archived or the Wayback Machine, there's a lot of fearful stuff being created rather than hopeful. So yeah, We are out of time. I really want to thank your availability to go past the hour that it's usually the time we have for the episodes. Thank you so much. I think it has been a very engaging and interesting conversation, and we can go a bit further, maybe another conversation when more features have been developed or new projects are coming. Thank you so much for your time. And it's a wrap. Thank you all. Muchas gracias a todos los que nos han sintonizado y acompañado hoy. Nos vemos en un próximo episodio de Infotecarios. Gracias por seguirnos y gracias por vernos en diferido. Gracias, Saúl, Martín, Rosario, Alan, Emily, Carl. Thank you so much.
One comment more. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Please, guys, share your email, Twitter, or whatever when we can contact with you. And of course, we're going to have another session with you. That was amazing, really. Thank you for your time. We can talk about the specific projects with everyone. That will be much interesting. That will be great. And please, the last comments for everyone. Please, we start with Emily, Rosario, Alan, and Carl.
No, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you all here today. This, makes me hopeful about the future of, intellectual community. And so it was really great to just talk a little bit about these projects. It's been such a pleasure to collaborate and learn from the Archives Unleashed folks and to be part of the cohort with Rosario and Alan. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Rosario, please.
Pues nada, muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de estar con la audiencia de Infotecarios, mostrando como los resultados de un proyecto que busca utilizar la información, en este caso archivos web, ¿no? Que serían como el nuevo tipo de archivos a los que se van a enfrentar los archivistas del siglo XXI. Uh-huh.
Gracias, Rosario. Alan, in Spanish or in English?
Muchas gracias por escucharnos y pues ojalá que esto le haya interesado a alguna persona para que investigue más sobre qué es el archivado web, qué es un archivo web y que vean la importancia de preservar la información que está en Internet.
Gracias, Alan. Carl, the last but not the least.
Thank you again for hosting each of us and for hosting the conversation. I'm glad we're ending on that note of the library being the place for people to meet and share and be creative and explore, whether that's online or in person. I hope it can always be that way.
Thank you, guys. We're going to put the webpage in our description in the YouTube. Síganos por Infotecarios. Vamos a cerrar en español. Gracias por todo, gracias por su tiempo. Recuerden seguirnos por Infotecarios. Este primer episodio 2024, bueno, seguiremos teniendo más episodios como este. Esperamos sea de utilidad. Por supuesto, tendremos invitados como Emily, Rosario, Alan y Carl. Por supuesto, un gusto tenerlos por acá. Y bueno, síganos por redes sociales, denle like por allí en la publicación y también en la campanita si quieren ver nuevo contenido en YouTube. Recuerden que este contenido estará en las diferentes redes sociales, audio y video. Y bueno, pues ahora sí, muchísimas gracias. No se desconecten, chicos. Gracias, hasta la siguiente y hasta luego.